Kasai, who's a hero of mine, someone that every time I get a phone call from her, I have to pinch myself and just be like, oh my God, that's Byron calling me, that's crazy. So I just want to say thank you for her words and her leadership, especially now in these times. I myself am the son of formerly undocumented immigrants in this country. My family left Guatemala during the Civil War in the early 1980s. They were escaping war, they were escaping poverty, and a very tumultuous time in the history of my country, especially with a lot of support from the U.S. foreign policy establishment at the time, right, to destabilize the country in the effort to beat out communism and whatnot. So this is an incredibly personal topic for me. I'm also standing here not just because I'm became a union member and an elected union leader, but I am here also in this position because of the labor movement itself. My family, my grandfather, when he came to the United States, he immediately started working in the packaging industry, and it was a union job. So he was one of the few, I think, Central American migrants at the time who found a union job, right? A job that was able to provide him a living wage, retirement security, a path to buying a home, which was unheard of in the 1990s for a lot of folks from Guatemala, and still today, right? Folks from Central America continue to be some of the most exploited, and abused workers in our city and in our country. So this is very much a story of the power of the labor movement, right? To transform lives, right? When you build a labor movement and a union movement, my dad's also a 32 GPJ SEIU member. When you build a labor movement that welcomes in immigrants, right, and organizes, immigrant and U.S.-born worker together, that's the key to building power, right? And I think we can't forget that today. I'm going to latch on to something Bhairavi said, which was that this is a question of economic policy. And I think that's very important. We had a leadership meeting earlier this morning with the Region 9A UAW locals in New York City, in which we touched a lot about just what the future path is during the Trump administration, Trump 2.0. We've heard a lot of pundits, right, talk about the need for an economic populism, and that's definitely true, right? Economic populist ideas work, right? Working class centered ideas, right? More jobs, more opportunities, making life more bearable for working class people is a great way to get away from both neoliberalism and also the appeal of Trumpism, right? Especially as we've seen increasingly, including in our state, in our city, working class communities of any background have started voting more and more for the Republican Party, right? But I want to add an amendment to that, right? It's not just economic populism, right? It's economic populism rooted in working class struggle. Why struggle? Because struggle, in order to succeed, right, requires unity. And the only way to build unity is through solidarity, which inherently brings different kinds of workers together, right? That's the way you win a strike. That's the way you win a record contract. That's the way you win an organizing drive. That's the way you win transformative legislation. That's the only way, right? So to me, it's not just which politician is going to say the right things, right? Or which formerly neoliberal Democratic senator now has speaks a different tune, right? Because they realize where the country's going. It's also about the experience of collective struggle, right? That's what the key is, because it's through that struggle that different people come into contact, learn how to organize and build together, have conflict. That's key, right? Have conflict. And if there's an organization, right, like a union, right, supporting those workers to achieve their goal that allows democracy to flourish, that is the key to changing the dynamics in this country right now, right? And we don't have enough of that. How do I know that? Because union density right now is the lowest it's been in decades, right? So that's the key, right, for us, as organizers, right, is to take that, I think, these ideas into all the work we do, and for our unions to really, this is the time, right, to just throw down, to give the resources necessary to organize, to enter into workplaces and spaces that we haven't been in before, to provide workers the resources and the tools to organize themselves to win, right? There's no workplace in this country you're going to enter in which you don't really have a very diverse workforce, right? Immigrant, non-immigrant, Black, white, Latino, Asian, that inherently have to work together. Therefore, they're exploited together, right? That's the key to winning. And for us at the UAW, right, whether it's been the stand-up strike of 2023 against the big three automakers, or winning for the first time at Volkswagen, right, the first non-union transnational plant in the South, it's been the same keys, right? These are, it's a multiracial, workforce that's headed towards the same goal, right? So again, from the collective bargaining and the strike context to politics, I think that's key. Because we know that the decimation of the working class in America, whether it's been through the loss of good-paying manufacturing jobs or the rise of opioids and the drug crisis that so many communities are facing, through the rise of mass incarceration as a supposed solution to all these things, all of these things has facilitated the scapegoating of immigrants, right? And I think that, to me, to get back to what I've already said, is the key, right? To frame immigration, illegal immigration, etc., as issues of class politics and as issues that are an obstacle, right, to building that solidarity that we need. And I think if we're rooted in that, we have a plan, right, and a vision to organize around this, I think we're going to be able to finally provide an alternative to Trumpism and to the neoliberal democratic establishment. Thank you, everyone.